I want to talk about how Ilia Topuria stacks up against Alexander Volkanovski and even Max Holloway as well, because we have a problem in the featherweight division where we can see an Ilia Topuria look absolutely unbeatable against Bryce Mitchell, and we can see him look like an absolute world beater against Josh Emmett, but it doesn't even matter, because it doesn't matter how you look against a Josh Emmett and against a Bryce Mitchell when you have guys like Holloway and Volkanovski at the top of your division. And it gives us a problem where we can never truly believe in a contender. And that's the problem. Normally you see a contender rising through a division and you can say that guy's going to be a champion. Everyone starts believing in him and it creates a ton of hype behind an up-and-coming contender in a division. Middleweight has the same problem. You can see a Marvin Vettori look good against a Jack Hermansson on the come-up, but it's like, what does that mean? How is this guy even going to look against a Robert Whittaker or an Israel Adesanya? They're just so many levels above the rest of the division. And that's the problem that we have at featherweight right now. So I want to talk about how Ilia Topuria matches up against a Holloway and against an Alexander Volkanovski, because he has weirdly better chances against one of them than the other, but in different ways. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video. So we're going to start with Max Holloway. I did a poll in yesterday's stream. I had a bit of viewers after the Ilia Topuria Josh Emmett card. I had a ton of viewers, and I did a poll that said who would win right now, Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. And it was majority Max Holloway. Okay, the majority of people picked Max Holloway to win. I feel like it was about 57% Max Holloway and about whatever the other percentage would be for Ilia Topuria, 43%, did I say 57? 43% to Ilia Topuria. So Max Holloway had the advantage in the poll, and that was even with bias that's going to be there because Ilia Topuria just had an amazing performance against Josh Emmett. So with recency bias, it was about 57% Max Holloway, 43% Ilia Topuria. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't think that Ilia Topuria can beat Max Holloway. When I think about a fight between Topuria and Holloway, I don't see him winning. I see Max Holloway winning that fight. However, why do I see Max Holloway winning that fight? Because I feel like he's going to be able to take advantage of Ilia Topuria in the later rounds because it's so difficult to hang with Holloway in those later rounds. But we have a weird thing, and this is why the poll maybe read as it did, because I did a different poll on Topuria versus Holloway with a catch, and I'm going to tell you what that catch was. When we talk about a matchup with Holloway, we automatically think it's a 5-rounder. It's going to be a 5-rounder. Every Holloway fight's a 5-rounder. It's going to be a 5-rounder, and these guys can't hang with him for 25 minutes. Only Alexander Volkanovski can hang with him for 25 minutes. And that's sort of our general sort of reaction when we hear about a matchup against Holloway. Even if you don't know whether or not it's going to be a 5 or a 3-rounder, you'll say, Holloway breaks him in round 4 and 5. You know what I mean? But it might not be. And I want to talk about the Arnold Allen fight. That was a 5-rounder, and it was a lot more competitive than some of the other matchups that Holloway's had against like a Calvin Kattar where he absolutely dominated. It was a lot more competitive of a fight. But that fight was originally supposed to happen in a 3-rounder at UFC London in March earlier this year. But Arnold Allen got injured and they had to rebook it, and it became a fight night main event where it was 5 rounds. And I said at the time, that's a terrible, terrible injury for Arnold Allen to have. You just lost an opportunity to fight Holloway over 3 rounds instead of 5. And I think, and the poll kind of represented this as well, because in my chat yesterday, I literally told chat, did you guys vote on that Ilia Topuria poll versus Max Holloway poll? Did you guys vote under the understanding that that was 5 rounds? And they all said yes, even though I didn't put 5 rounds in the poll. So I said, okay, let me do this poll again, but this time, think about it in terms of a 3-rounder. The majority of people voted Ilia Topuria. He does have a chance against a Max Holloway because although Max Holloway did look good against Arnold Allen, and you're not allowed to criticize him whatsoever because his fan base is, it's just a little bit intolerable, or intolerant, should I say, to anyone's criticism of Max Holloway whatsoever. But I do want to say, Max Holloway isn't the same guy he once was anymore, okay? And that's very important to say, because in his last few performances that we've seen, his last 3 performances that we have seen in Max Holloway's career, all 3 of them in Arnold Allen, Alexander Volkanovski, and Yair Rodriguez, there's been a change in Holloway's approach to the game. Some people say this is an improvement, but maybe against a guy like Ilia Topuria, this is going to be a bit of a negative for him in that matchup. Because I've noticed that Max Holloway, against fighters that move around a lot, all over the place, Yair Rodriguez, Alexander Volkanovski, and Arnold Allen, they all move around all over the place, non-stop footwork. Holloway can't have the same level of output against those guys, and he doesn't take as much damage against that level of guy either, where they're moving around so much. He doesn't really go for as much. He doesn't plant his feet and try and throw with them because they're not staying in the pocket with him. They're moving in and out of the pocket, and that starts to frustrate him. And that's why we've seen Holloway have more competitive fights as of recently in his career. But when you look at a guy like Calvin Kattar, who's a boxer, who doesn't move his feet as much, and maybe has been having some problems earlier in his career, at least against guys like Renato Moicano, where he wasn't moving enough and he was getting his legs chewed up and he was a stationary target. We see Holloway like to trade with them in the pocket and take one to give one. Now, I'm going to wonder this. If Holloway, later on in his career now, took the damage of the Rodriguez fight, took the damage of the Alexander Volkanovski trilogy, had some damage in the Arnold Allen fight as well, if Max Holloway sees a stationary Ilia Topuria slowly marching him down like a featherweight Chris Curtis, if you will, but actually good at fighting. If he sees Ilia Topuria stepping into the pocket with him just barely and ready to trade shots, will the old Holloway come back that was there against Ortega when he was more flat-footed, against Kattar when he was flat-footed in their matchup, against the other guys that we've seen Holloway look so good against? Because even Edgar, who moved around a bunch, made it a lot closer with Holloway because of that. Do we see a better Holloway against Ilia Topuria, where he sees a stationary boxer and he just absolutely obliterates him, takes every shot that Ilia Topuria has and hits him back with 3 of them? Maybe. But there is also a chance that we see Holloway get into the pocket. Same words I just said about how he could do good against Ilia Topuria. Get into the pocket, take shots to give them, take a few shots from Ilia and start giving 4 or 5 back. Can he take the shots off Ilia Topuria? Because Ilia Topuria's aren't just to the head. And when you watch fighters against Max Holloway, they end up headhunting quite a bit. You saw that with Calvin Kattar. He barely ever went to the body. We saw that with Brian Ortega. He was headhunting as well. We see it with a ton of people that end up going up against Holloway. He's so easy to hit to the head, they start doing it almost too much. What happens if Ilia Topuria tricks Holloway into the pocket and can actually land with more vicious power than a Kattar, than an Ortega? Because I do think he has more power than them. What happens when he lands on Holloway? Because eventually Holloway's not going to constantly take this level of punishment. You know? Eventually he's not going to. And what happens when Ilia does something that these other Holloway fighters that have been dominated by him, these other Holloway opponents that have been dominated by him, haven't done yet? What if he goes to the body in the exchange while Holloway's trying to answer back with 3 straight punches? Ilia Topuria's digging for that liver in the pocket in a 3-rounder. I think Ilia Topuria would lose to Max Holloway, but I think it's a much more interesting matchup than people give it credit for, and I don't think Holloway would be a big favorite. I think he's going to be a huge favorite against a Korean zombie. I think he would be, at best, a 2-1 favorite over Ilia Topuria, especially in a 3-rounder. In a 5-rounder, maybe it's a different story. Holloway will have an advantage there. But in a 3-rounder, with Topuria chopping at that calf like we just saw him do against Josh Emmett, we've seen that kick can do bad things to Holloway. Holloway takes leg kicks very well, but we see with opponents that throw them, like Volkanovski and Rodriguez, it can slow down Holloway and make him an easier target to hit. So if Ilia Topuria can land with power enough to keep the respect of Holloway from just marching him down and also chop that leg in the first round, he can change the way the fight looks with Holloway. And if it's a 3-rounder, all I'm saying is this: if I'm Holloway's management team, I'm only taking Fight Night main events until I'm fighting for a title again. Because I think Holloway giving an opponent an opportunity to fight him over 3 rounds instead of 5 is giving them the blessing of all blessings. And Allen really missed out on having that 3-rounder against Holloway and ended up having a 5 where he lost. But He won the 5th round before getting knocked down at the end of it against Holloway. He was doing good in the 5th round. So maybe there are some adjustments that these up-and-coming featherweight contenders are making that are going to be able to deal with a Holloway of the division. But I want to talk about Volkanovski as well. Because I think Ilia Topuria, if you asked me this, I think Ilia Topuria has a better chance of finishing Volk than he does of finishing Max Holloway. And that's only because we've never seen Holloway's chin fail him. And we've seen Volkanovski's chin. You know, he's been wobbled, he's been dropped, he's been wobbled by great opponents, but he's been dropped and wobbled in his career. He got knocked off balance by Ortega and put into a guillotine. He got, dropped by Holloway twice in their rematch that they had at Fight Island. There were some circumstances around that, though, but he's been dropped by Chad Mendes. He got dropped and wobbled by Islam Makhachev as well. There's a few moments where we've seen that chin of Volkanovski give way, if you will. And if Ilia Topuria lands on him and lands on Holloway, I think he has a better chance at knocking down a Volk than he does of knocking down a Holloway. But I don't think he beats Volkanovski either. And this is the problem. I don't think he beats Volkanovski because one thing that Volk does that Emmett wasn't doing, Emmett throws shots with the intention of continuing to go forward after that shot has landed. We saw it over and over again. I made a video on my second channel breaking down how Ilia Topuria was outboxing Josh Emmett and giving him a boxing lesson. And in that fight, Josh Emmett was doing his signature overhand right, step through with the right leg, and then throw the left hook afterwards after his stance has been switched. And he just carries that momentum forward into those punches to give them the most power he possibly can. Ilia Topuria was able to pull counter on Josh Emmett so much because of this. He would see the right hand, and he would know that Emmett was going to step through to throw the left hook. So he'd start preparing for it. He'd start setting up counters. He'd start faking an engagement and then stepping back and throwing a right hand counter afterwards. And that's how he ended up catching Josh Emmett a lot of the time in that fight. But Volkanovski is very different to Josh Emmett. He's been used to getting in and out of the pocket against taller fighters for a very long time in his career. He's had a ton of matchups where his objective has been to get in and out of the pocket and dance around on the outside again, and then get in and out of the pocket again and win an exchange. Emmett throws shots with the intention of coming forwards after those shots have been thrown. Volkanovski, if you look back at his fight against Holloway in the trilogy and look back at his fight against the Korean Zombie as well, you'll see that Volkanovski has a style of striking where he throws with the intention of being ready to pull back afterwards. And I think that's where Ilia Topuria is going to have to maybe go first against a Volkanovski. I don't think he's going to be able to wait for Volk like he did against a Josh Emmett. I don't think he's going to be able to wait for Volk to go first and then try and catch Volk coming in with a counter shot. Volk will do that sometimes. But he's a good game planner, Volk. So you'll see what Ilia Topuria does so well. And I think he's going to wait and make Ilia Topuria go first in their fight against each other. Because he knows if they're at range and they're leg kicking each other, Volk wins that fight. You know what I mean? So if Ilia Topuria wants to win, he ain't going to be able to wait for a counter shot. Because Volk throws shots with the intention of pulling back out afterwards and then stepping back in for another few shots after that as well. So I don't think Ilia's going to be able to go leg kick for leg kick with him. I don't think he's going to be able to counter Volk coming in. I think he's going to have to go first against Volk. And I think if you do that, you end up getting schooled. Because that's what Volk likes. On the back foot, throwing shots to interrupt you. Throwing shots out there. And you'll see Volk did this a lot against Ortega as well. He rears his chin up a bit. So I feel like Volk, he throws shots and then immediately he's starting to sort of lean backwards with his guard up and his lead hand out there after he's thrown a jab, just to sort of frame off and find distance again. You'll see it over and over again in his fights. So I think Ilia Topuria is almost going to have to find like a Josh Emmett combo shot on Volk to beat him. He's going to have to throw a big shot, step through and throw another one to the liver or the head with a left hook. If he wants to land on Volkanovski, I think he's going to have to do something that he's not comfortable doing. I think he's going to have to do something where he's not as good as if he was doing the counter shot routine that we saw against Josh Emmett with the educated pressure coming forwards, waiting for Emmett to go first and pull counter in and throw in extra shots at the end of the combos. I just don't think he beats Volk. I don't think he beats Holloway, but there are ways that he could with both of them. And I think if Rodriguez beats Volk, which he could well do, Rodriguez has a huge chance of beating Volkanovski. And then we do end up seeing if Holloway beats TKZ, which I think he will because it's a sacrificial lamb fight. If Holloway beats Korean Zombie and Rodriguez beats Volk, we could see a rematch between Rodriguez and Volk, and then we could see Holloway Topuria. And I think Topuria would have a decent chance in a 3-rounder. So at the end of the day, I don't think he beats both. I don't think he beats either of them. It's so hard to say that a featherweight will until we see them actually do it. I don't think he beats either of them, but I think he has a solid chance against Max Holloway if he can make it a 3-rounder. And I think if the UFC really are trying to get a bit of turnover in the featherweight division and trying to get one of these contenders to beat Holloway, they will book it as a 3-rounder like they initially tried to book the Holloway-Allen fight. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Ilia Topuria does next. I think he's going to get a title shot next. If Volkanovski beats Rodriguez, which I think he's going to do, but I am worried about it, and I'm going to make a video on that as well. If Volkanovski does beat Rodriguez, which I think he's going to do, I think they have to do Volk versus Ilia Topuria, because, again, I mentioned this before in other videos, Aljo's fighting in August. He won't be looking to come back before the end of the year. We've got Makhachev fighting in October. He's not going to be ready to come back before the end of the year. And then Holloway's there fighting TKZ in August as well. He's not going to be ready to come back at the end of the year. The only available next contender, if Volkanovski wants to fight again in 2023 after July, if he does get past Rodriguez, is Ilia Topuria. There's no one else. So I'm hoping he gets ranked number 3. I don't think he beats either of them. But you got to admit, he could end up being like a more technical Chad Mendes to Volk. I know Volk has improved massively since then, but Ilia Topuria is a higher level than Chad Mendes as well. So maybe he could drop Volk at one point in that fight. I could see it happening. I just don't see him finishing Volk. I see Volk peppering him at range, beating him up, landing a bunch of good jabs. I think Volk has a much better jab than Ilia Topuria. He has a longer jab than Ilia Topuria as well. I think his footwork's a lot better than Ilia Topuria on the outside, which is where he's going to be in that matchup. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next for Ilia. I think he's got a genuine chance. I think he's got a better chance than Arnold Allen had against both of them in Volk and Holloway. And I think he's got the best chance out of any contender we've seen recently coming up in the featherweight division. And he's proved that. Looking forward to it. Like and subscribe. See you later. I just wanted to talk about those two matchups on a more intricate, detailed level. I know some of you guys might think I'm rambling in these videos, but I do have a lot of thoughts about the style matchups there. I just think you have to be a bit more wild to beat Volk with head kicks like Yair and jump knees and stuff like that. Even Holloway had to channel his inner Yair Rodriguez and started catching Volk with a head kick in their second fight to try and drop him and have any level of success. So I think you have to be a bit wild to beat Volk, which Ilia Topuria isn't. He's a little bit more reserved and he's a little bit more technical, and I don't think he beats Volk at that game. And I think he needs to have... I don't even know. I think he has got a shot against Holloway, though. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Toodle pip. See you later. Goodbye.